Most people know Kansas City for barbecue and maybe a Chiefs game. A few know the Jazz history. Almost nobody knows the full picture, the infrastructure, the corruption, the corporate story, and the geography that built and rebuilt this city multiple times over. Kansas City is stranger, older, and more consequential than its reputation suggests. Here are 35 facts that are completely true and almost impossible to believe. Kansas City sits in 2 states at once. The metropolitan area straddles the Missouri-Kansas border so completely that there is a Kansas City, Missouri, and a Kansas City, Kansas. They are 2 separate cities with 2 governments and 2 tax systems, yet they share a name, a highway network, and a sports fan base. The state line runs through neighborhoods, across streets, and in some cases directly through building footprints. Residents cross it multiple times a day without thinking about it. The state line between Missouri and Kansas was drawn specifically to exclude Kansas City from Kansas. When Kansas was admitted to the Union in 1861, the boundary was set 2 miles west of the Missouri River, a deliberate political decision that kept the existing city on the Missouri side. The result is a metropolitan identity permanently split between 2 states that have spent decades competing for the same businesses, residents, and tax base. 3. Kansas City has more miles of boulevard than Paris. The Park and Boulevard system, designed in the 1890s by landscape architect George Kessler, stretches over 100 miles and connects 112 parks. Paris, widely considered the gold standard of European urban design, has fewer total boulevard miles. Most visitors to Kansas City drive these streets without knowing they are moving through one of the most deliberately designed public space systems in American history. Kansas City has more fountains than any city in the world, except Rome. The official count is more than 200 publicly registered fountains. Rome is the only city with more. This was a deliberate civic identity project that started in the early 20th century and continued across decades of public investment. Kansas City decided it wanted to be known for fountains and then actually followed through. Most American cities that make similar decisions do not follow through. The Kansas City stockyards were once the largest in the world. At their peak in the early 20th century, they processed more livestock than any other facility on Earth. The city was the center of the American meat industry, not Chicago, despite what most history books suggest. The infrastructure, the rail connections, the labor force were all built around an industry that employed tens of thousands and fed a nation. Almost none of it remains. 6. Kansas City jazz did not come from New Orleans. It developed independently and produced a sound that directly influenced bebop and modern jazz in ways that New Orleans did not. The Kansas City style, blues-drenched and built on extended improvisation, was cultivated in clubs that operated openly during Prohibition under the protection of the Pendergast political machine. The music existed because the corruption allowed it. That's not a footnote. That's the origin story. 7. Tom Pendergast ran Kansas City like a private fiefdom for nearly 3 decades. From the 1910s through the late 1930s, he controlled city contracts, police appointments, judicial selections, and voter rolls. He delivered Kansas City's votes to Franklin Roosevelt in 1932 and launched the career of a county judge named Harry Truman. Pendergast was convicted of tax evasion in 1939. The city he built, and its roads, its infrastructure, and its institutions, is still largely the city Kansas City lives in today. Harry Truman was a Pendergast machine politician before he became President of the United States. Truman's early career as county judge and in the United States Senate was built entirely on Pendergast's support. Without Pendergast, there is no Senator Truman. Without Senator Truman, there is no Vice President Truman. Without Vice President Truman, someone else makes the decision to drop the atomic bomb. Kansas City's political corruption is woven directly into the decisive moments of the 20th century. 9. Kansas City was the original western terminus of the Santa Fe Trail. Every wagon train that rolled southwest toward New Mexico began its journey from the Kansas City riverfront. The city was the last reliable supply point before travelers entered the open plains. It was the last connection to the eastern economy. Kansas City did not just benefit from westward expansion. It was the structural gateway through which that expansion physically moved. The Kansas City area has more than 200 million square feet of underground storage space. The region's thick limestone formations were mined extensively in the 20th century, leaving behind massive caverns converted into warehouses, data centers, and cold storage. The underground city beneath Kansas City is one of the largest subsurface commercial real estate markets in the world. Most of it is invisible from street level. Most people have no idea it exists. 11. Kansas City's barbecue tradition began with the livestock industry, not with any single pitmaster. When the stockyards operated at full capacity, the less desirable cuts, ribs, brisket, and burnt ends were cheap and plentiful. Black pitmasters in the 18th and Vine neighborhood developed slow cooking techniques to make those cuts extraordinary. The cuisine Kansas City now markets as civic identity was born from economic necessity in a specific community that the rest of the city has rarely fully acknowledged. 12. The Royals' 1985 World Series win required a call that almost every baseball historian considers one of the worst in postseason history. In Game 6, umpire Don Denkinger called Jorge Orta safe at first on a play that replay clearly showed was out. The Royals scored the winning run, won Game 6, and then won Game 7. The Cardinals have not won a World Series since. The call is still argued about in both cities. It probably always will be. 13. Kansas City was the first American city to get a commercial cable television system. In 1948, a local entrepreneur strung cable from a hilltop antenna to homes in the reception-challenged southern part of the city, creating what historians recognize as the first subscription cable television service in the United States. The industry that now generates hundreds of billions annually and is currently being disrupted by streaming was invented in Kansas City to solve a basic reception problem on the Missouri Hills. The Flint Hills, the last remaining intact tallgrass prairie on Earth, begin almost immediately west of Kansas City. Before European settlement, tallgrass prairie covered 170 million acres of the central United States. Today, less than 4% remains. Nearly all of it is within a few hours of the city. Kansas City sits at the edge of an ecosystem more endangered by percentage of original coverage than the Amazon rainforest. Most people who live there have never visited it. 15. The American Jazz Museum and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum share a building at 18th and Vine. Both are nationally significant, and both are dramatically undervisited. The Negro Leagues Museum holds the record of a parallel professional sports league that operated for decades under systematic exclusion, producing players who statistically competed with or exceeded the best in the segregated major leagues. It is one of the most important sports museums in the country. Most Americans have never been. If you have made it this far, you are exactly who this channel exists for. Subscribe if you have not. We are not even halfway through. The Kansas City Chiefs appeared in 5 consecutive AFC championship games from 2020 to 2024, reaching the Super Bowl 4 times and winning 3. This level of sustained dominance has no modern precedent in the NFL. It is happening in a market the size of Kansas City, not New York, not Los Angeles. Nobody who watched the 2013 season had that on their bingo card. 17. Headquarters have been quietly leaving Kansas City for years. Companies that built their identity here in logistics, financial services, agriculture, and energy have relocated, been acquired, or restructured in ways that moved executive decision-making elsewhere. The jobs often stay, the corporate identity does not. A city that was once home to the decision-makers of major American industries is increasingly a place where those decisions are executed rather than made. Kansas City's highway system was built directly through its most established black neighborhoods. Construction of Interstate 70 and 35 in the 1950s and the 1960s required demolishing thousands of homes and businesses around 18th and Vine and along the Troost Avenue corridor. The people displaced were predominantly black. The institutions destroyed were irreplaceable. The routes chosen were not the only feasible engineering options. Kansas City has never fully reckoned with this publicly. 19. Troost Avenue is one of the most documented racial dividing lines in American urban geography. For decades, it has functioned as a de facto boundary between predominantly black neighborhoods to the east and predominantly white neighborhoods to the west. The divide is visible in property values, school funding, grocery store density, and life expectancy. It was not created by accident. It was created by decades of deliberate redlining, restrictive covenants, and municipal investment decisions that are still visible on any demographic map today. 20. Kansas City has had one of the highest murder rates among large American cities for years. That shows up in national crime statistics every year, and it is almost never mentioned in the city's promotional materials or in sports coverage. The violence is geographically concentrated, with specific zip codes recording rates that qualify as crisis level by international standards. The disconnect between Kansas City's national image and this reality is one of the more striking examples of selective civic narrative in America. The Kansas City metropolitan area is one of the most significant logistics hubs in the United States. It sits at the intersection of more interstate highways than almost any other inland city, and is within a one-day truck drive of more than 85% of the continental United States population. The same geography that made it a 19th century trade hub makes it a 21st century warehouse and distribution center. The warehouses are less romantic than the stockyards. The economic function is identical. Kansas City's original airport was considered one of the most convenient in the United States, and the city demolished it. The 1972 terminal design featured 3 horseshoe-shaped terminals where every gate was within 30 seconds of the curb. The terminals were torn down beginning in 2020 and replaced with a single consolidated building that is more profitable for airlines and concessions, and significantly less convenient for travelers. The old design was celebrated nationally. The decision to replace it was not. Kansas City Union Station was once the 3rd busiest train station in the United States. By the 1980s, it was largely abandoned. A community-led restoration, funded by a voter-approved by-state tax, returned it to public use as a museum and event space, one of the largest historic preservation projects in American history. The station is now genuinely beautiful. It serves almost no trains. The building was saved. The function it was built for was not. Charlie Parker was born in Kansas City, Kansas in 1920 and developed his alto saxophone technique in the 18th and Vine clubs as a teenager. His innovations, the rapid chromatic improvisation, the complex chord substitutions, the vocabulary that became bebop, fundamentally altered the direction of jazz and influenced virtually every form of popular music that followed. He died in New York at 34. Kansas City produced him. New York got him. That is a pattern the city knows well. The Kansas City area has one of the highest concentrations of animal health companies in the world. More than 300 animal health, veterinary, and agriculture-related companies operate in the region, sometimes called the Animal Health Corridor. This is a direct descendant of the stockyard era. When the livestock industry declined, the veterinary and pharmaceutical infrastructure built around it evolved into a globally significant biotech sector. Almost no one outside the industry is aware this exists. Number 26. Kansas City's streetcar system was one of the most extensive in the United States in the early 20th century. By the 1950s, it had been completely dismantled. The city spent the next 50 years entirely dependent on automobile infrastructure. A small, modern streetcar line opened in 2016 along Main Street. It is popular with riders. It covers about 2 miles. The gap between what the original system was and what exists today is a useful summary of mid-century American urban policy. 27. Kansas City's metropolitan area produces more college graduates per capita than it retains. The region has significant higher education infrastructure, but graduates leave for larger coastal markets at a rate the local economy cannot absorb. The talent pipeline flows through Kansas City on its way somewhere else. Reversing that pattern is one of the central economic development challenges of the next decade. The city does not yet have a fully formed answer to it. The Sprint Center, now T-Mobile Center, was built in 2007 without an anchor professional sports tenant. Kansas City constructed a major league caliber arena on the theory that the building would attract a franchise. It never did. The arena operates successfully as a concert and event venue, but after nearly 2 decades, it remains without a permanent professional sports tenant. It is one of the most successful arenas in the country without an anchor, and one of the stranger infrastructure bets in American sports history. 29. Kansas City's economy diversified significantly in the 20th century, precisely because it had to. When the stockyards declined and the railroad industry contracted, the city was forced to develop financial services, telecommunications, healthcare, and manufacturing. That forced diversification is part of why Kansas City avoided the catastrophic collapse that hit cities more dependent on a single industry. The economic resilience that boosters describe as a civic strength was born from crisis, not from planning. 30. Kansas City has been one of the top destinations for remote worker relocation since 2020. Affordability, housing stock, central location, and quality of life metrics have pushed the metropolitan area onto lists it historically never appeared on. The in-migration is measurable in housing data. It is also putting pressure on the affordability that made the city attractive in the first place. A dynamic Kansas City is watching develop in real time without a fully formed policy response. 31. Kansas City's Crossroads Arts District contains more than 100 galleries, studios, and arts organizations within a walkable area. First Fridays, a monthly gallery walk, draws tens of thousands on a single night. The district developed organically in a formerly industrial neighborhood, and it anchors a broader creative economy that the city's own marketing rarely communicates effectively to outsiders. Kansas City has a serious arts infrastructure. It has never figured out how to tell that story at scale. 32. The Kansas City area sits at the eastern edge of the Ogallala Aquifer's political consequences. The aquifer, the underground reservoir supplying agriculture across 8 states, is depleting in western Kansas at a rate that will reshape Great Plains farming within decades. Kansas City is close enough to the political fallout to be affected, without being directly dependent on the water. The agricultural and economic disruption heading toward this region from the west is not yet fully priced into its planning. Kansas City's population within its city limits is smaller than most people assume, roughly 500,000. The metropolitan area is closer to 2.2 million. That gap tells a specific story about post-war suburban development, highway investment, and municipal annexation politics that shaped the tax base, school systems, and racial geography of the city in ways still playing out today. Kansas City. The place and Kansas City, the city, are two very different things. 34. The Crossroads, the River Market, the Westport Entertainment District, and the Plaza were all developed in different eras, under different economic conditions, for different populations, and they coexist in a metro area that has not fully integrated them into a coherent urban identity. Kansas City has multiple compelling neighborhoods that do not quite add up to a city with a single, legible story. That is both its challenge and arguably one of its most honest characteristics. Kansas City is in the middle of a transition it hasn't fully named yet. The industries that built it are gone or diminished. Corporate anchors are thinning. The infrastructure decisions of the post-war era created inequities that still shape daily life. At the same time, the Chiefs are winning. The art scene is serious. Affordability is real. And people are arriving from coasts that priced them out. Whether the city captures that momentum or watches it pass through on the way somewhere else is not yet decided. That is what makes it worth paying attention to right now. That's 35 facts about Kansas City, documented, real, and built to complicate whatever you thought you already knew. Drop a comment and tell us which one changed how you see the city. Subscribe if this is what you're here for. Kansas City isn't done being interesting, and neither is this channel.